The first day at the Interstellar Academy was already a disaster for Eli. The enormous structure loomed above him like a mountain of glass and steel, stretching far into the sky. Alien ships of every shape and size glided around, docking effortlessly as cadets of all species hurried to their classes. Eli's small human shuttle landed with a soft thump, and he could feel every pair of eyes on him, mostly curious, some disdainful. He had known humans were not exactly respected in this academy. Among the stars, humans were seen as fragile, short-lived, and relatively weak. But Eli didn't care. He had worked his whole life to be here, to train among beings who could leap 10 meters in a single bound or think faster than any human mind should manage. Today, he would survive the first day. That was enough. As he walked through the bustling hallways, he noticed Lyra. She was impossible to miss. Her skin shimmered faintly in hues of silver and blue, and her eyes glowed with an inner light. Every movement she made seemed precise, elegant, almost effortless. She was surrounded by other aliens, all watching her with admiration. Eli instinctively straightened his posture. He would not be intimidated. The first class was combat training, and the arena was unlike anything Eli had imagined. Gravity shifted, obstacles appeared and disappeared, and alien instructors floated in midair, observing every move. When Lyra entered, the murmurs grew louder. She was already performing aerial maneuvers that would take Eli years to even understand. "Look at him," she said with a sharp laugh, her voice musical but biting. "The human thinks he can survive here." She tilted her head, examining him like one examines a curious insect. Eli clenched his fists, ignoring the sting. The instructor blew a whistle and the training began. Aliens zipped around, using abilities humans could barely imagine. Eli struggled to keep up. He stumbled over shifting platforms, missed grabs, and nearly collided with a hovering drone. Each mistake felt like a spotlight on his inadequacy. Lyra, meanwhile, moved through the course with grace and speed, making it look effortless. At one point, she flipped over a moving wall and landed perfectly on a tiny platform, glancing back at Eli with a smirk. "Come on, human. You're embarrassing yourself." He wanted to answer, wanted to tell her that appearances could be deceiving, that humans were clever in ways she might never understand. But the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he focused on learning. He watched her movements carefully, noting patterns, pauses, and habits. She moved beautifully, yes, but she was predictable in subtle ways. By the end of the exercise, Lyra had completed the course flawlessly. Eli had made it through, barely, scratched and panting, but still standing. Other cadets whispered among themselves, some in awe, others in pity. Eli's face burned with embarrassment, but deep inside, a spark had lit. He would not be just a footnote in this academy. After the class, Lyra approached him. Her stride was confident, almost predatory, but there was a hint of curiosity in her gaze. "You actually made it through," she said. Her tone carried amusement and disbelief. "I expected you to fail within minutes, not bad for a human." She laughed softly, but the laughter wasn't cruel, it was sharp, teasing. Eli straightened. "Thanks," he said simply. He didn't let her see the way his heart raced. He wasn't just angry at being mocked, he was determined. Determined to show her and everyone here that humans had something aliens didn't. Over the next few days, Eli found himself under Lyra's subtle scrutiny. She would challenge him in drills, always testing his limits, always finding ways to provoke him. Each time he learned something new, about himself, about her, about the way humans could adapt when pushed. One afternoon, during a simulation exercise that involved navigating a maze filled with moving obstacles and holographic enemies, Lyra cornered him deliberately. "You think you can keep up with me?" she asked, her eyes gleaming. "I bet you can't even touch me in a real duel. But stubbornness won't help you survive here." He drew diagrams, wrote notes, replayed memories of the course in his head. He noticed tiny details, the way she shifted her weight before a jump, the subtle pause before she attacked, the way she relied on certain instincts rather than analyzing every step. To anyone else, she would have been untouchable, but to him, she was learning material. By the next day, Eli felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. Fear because Lyra was still leagues ahead of him, excitement because he had discovered a way to approach her challenges differently. Humans could not match aliens in raw strength or speed, but humans could think, improvise, and adapt in ways the aliens rarely considered. That was his advantage. During morning exercises, Lyra noticed the change. Eli moved with more confidence, more awareness. He was still not as fast or agile as she was, but he anticipated her moves more effectively. She tilted her head, clearly intrigued. "Interesting," she murmured to herself, just loud enough for him to hear. When they sparred again that day, she tried to catch him off guard with a sudden feint. Eli anticipated it, countered with a move he had practiced tirelessly, and avoided her attack. For a brief moment, he saw her eyes widen in surprise. He had done what no other human had ever done in front of her. He had made her pause. The rest of the day, the whispers among cadets grew louder. "Did you see that human?" some said. "He actually blocked her." Others shook their heads, unwilling to believe it. Eli ignored them all. What mattered was the knowledge he had gained, the small victory that hinted at something bigger. By the end of the week, Eli's reputation was changing. He was no longer just a clumsy human who struggled to keep up. He was the human who had surprised Lyra, the one who had made the impossible slightly more possible. And Lyra, she seemed to enjoy the challenge. She would approach him with new exercises, tests, and even puzzles that required both intelligence and agility. Each time, Eli learned, adapted, and improved. One evening, Lyra found him alone in the Academy's observation deck, staring out at the glowing stars beyond. "You know," she said casually, stepping beside him, "most humans would have given up after the first day, or the first week, but not you." "We'll see about that," she said softly, almost as if issuing a challenge. She didn't mock him this time. There was curiosity and perhaps even a hint of respect. "I'm going to test you properly, a real duel. When the time comes, you'll either impress me or fail completely." This was an opportunity to show not just Lyra but the entire Academy what humans could really do. As Lyra left, Eli's mind raced with possibilities. He knew the duel would not be easy. Lyra was fast, strong, and brilliant. But he also knew that humans had one thing many aliens underestimated: the ability to adapt, to think creatively, to turn disadvantages into advantages. And so Eli began his true training, not just in strength or speed, but in strategy, observation, and understanding. Each day he watched, learned, and prepared. Every mockery from Lyra was now fuel, every challenge a stepping stone. He would turn her doubt into respect, her laughter into acknowledgement, and perhaps in time something more. The Academy's lights dimmed that night, casting long shadows across the metallic corridors. Eli lay awake, imagining the duel to come. It would be dangerous, exhausting, and terrifying, but also exhilarating. Somewhere deep inside, he knew this was the moment that would define him. Humans were underestimated across the galaxy. But Eli had just begun to show that underestimation was their greatest mistake. And when the day of the duel came, Lyra would see that the human she mocked was not just capable. He was extraordinary. After the duel challenge had been issued, Eli knew that this was no longer about surviving in the Academy. This was personal. The human who had always been underestimated now had a target, and it was not just to survive, but to win. And he knew he could not win by strength alone. Lyra was faster, more agile, and had years of experience he could never match. But humans had something aliens often overlooked: the ability to think differently, to improvise, and to use intelligence as a weapon. Eli spent the next morning in the Academy's training halls, practicing basic maneuvers, but this time with a plan. Every movement, every strategy was designed not just to make him stronger, but to exploit the tiniest flaws in his opponent's style. He reviewed holograms of Lyra's previous exercises, noting how she relied on certain instincts. Her balance, her timing, even her slight hesitation before attacking, all of these were opportunities. It was not brute force that would win this duel. It was observation, patience, and cunning. He found a quiet room in the human training wing, hidden from the prying eyes of the alien cadets. Here, he could focus without distraction. Eli built small mechanical obstacles to simulate Lyra's attacks, creating traps that would force him to react quickly. Each day, he set the challenges higher, moving faster, reacting faster. Even when he failed, he made sure to analyze why. Every failure became a lesson, every misstep a chance to improve. At the same time, Eli reached out to other human cadets. Many had been quietly struggling, just like him. They had ideas, unconventional solutions, and instincts born from living on a planet less forgiving than Lyra's home world. Together, they formed a small team. They trained, debated strategies, and shared insights. The aliens never suspected that humans could work together in ways that combined creativity and discipline. Lyra, of course, continued her teasing. She would appear unexpectedly during drills, challenging him with her usual flair. "You're still slow, human," she said one day, flipping effortlessly over a wall as he stumbled behind her. "I almost feel sorry for you." "Keep watching," he replied quietly, though inside he was already analyzing her moves for the 100th time. It was during one late-night session that he discovered something important. He had been running through a mock combat sequence with floating platforms and simulated enemy drones. Lyra appeared silently, observing. Instead of the usual taunts, she watched intently, her expression unreadable. Eli executed a particularly complex maneuver, dodging a drone and flipping onto a narrow platform. He realized with a rush of satisfaction that he had moved exactly as she would expect. But then he added a subtle twist, a minor shift in his balance that made him unpredictable. Lyra's eyes widened just slightly. A tiny sign of surprise, but enough to let him know he was making progress. The following days became a blur of preparation. Eli did not just train physically, he studied Lyra's psychology. He considered her habits, her reactions to stress, the way she handled victory and defeat. He realized that Lyra, despite her brilliance, often underestimated humans. That underestimation was a weapon he could use. While she relied on predictable instincts, he could think 2 or 3 steps ahead. He could turn her strengths into weaknesses. One evening, after exhausting training sessions, Eli returned to his quarters and sat before a small window overlooking the academy. The stars stretched endlessly beyond, glittering like diamonds against the dark. He felt the weight of what he was doing. The duel was not just about proving himself to Lyra, it was about proving something bigger. That humans were clever, resilient, and capable of surpassing expectations, even when everyone doubted them. The night before a scheduled practice duel, Eli could hardly sleep. He replayed every moment of the past weeks in his mind, planning each reaction, predicting each move. He thought about the obstacles he had created, the traps he had rehearsed, and the small but crucial tweaks he had made to his agility and strategy. For the first time, he felt a flicker of confidence. It was still risky, still dangerous, but he had a plan. When the day of practice arrived, the arena was crowded. Lyra had called for a public rehearsal of sorts, partly to humiliate him, partly out of curiosity. Eli's heart raced, but he did not let it show. He walked onto the platform calmly, his mind sharp, his body ready. Lyra appeared with her usual grace, floating into the arena with a smirk. "Ready to fail again, human?" she teased. Eli didn't answer. Instead, he nodded once, silently acknowledging the challenge. The instructor signaled the start, and they moved. Lyra attacked first, fast and precise. Her movements were fluid, almost impossible to predict. Eli dodged carefully, using his observations from the past weeks. He anticipated a jump and pivoted midair, landing behind her. She glanced back, slightly surprised, but she quickly adjusted, spinning toward him with her signature agility. For several minutes, the duel continued like this. Lyra was brilliant, and Eli struggled to match her speed. But he relied on strategy. He used the arena itself, platforms, walls, floating objects, to limit her options, channeling her attacks into areas he had prepared. He improvised constantly, turning her strength into vulnerability. The other cadets whispered, watching the human adapt in ways no one had thought possible. Midway through, Eli saw an opening. Lyra had overextended in a complex spin, leaving a brief gap in her defense. Without hesitation, he moved, flipping over a platform and landing lightly behind her. It was a subtle maneuver, not a strike, but enough to demonstrate control and understanding. Lyra paused, assessing him, her usual arrogance tempered by surprise. The practice duel ended without a clear winner, but the effect was undeniable. Lyra approached him afterward, her usual teasing tone replaced by something softer, more thoughtful. "You've improved," she admitted, almost reluctantly. "More than I expected. Perhaps there's hope for humans after all." He stayed late after classes, running drills no one else dared to attempt. He learned to move faster, balance better, and react with precision. He developed contingency plans for every possible scenario, considering not just the physical aspects of combat but the psychological ones. He practiced patience, endurance, and observation, learning to read subtle cues from his opponent. Lyra, meanwhile, watched from a distance. Sometimes she would approach, offering challenges that seemed casual but were designed to probe his limits. Other times, she would observe quietly, her curiosity growing. Eli noticed small changes in her behavior. Her smiles were less mocking, her tone less sharp, and there were moments when she paused, considering his actions more carefully than she had with any other cadet. Eli's reputation among the other humans grew as well. They began to see him not just as a struggling cadet, but as a leader, someone who could turn weakness into strength through careful thought and perseverance. They trained alongside him, learning from his strategies, sharing their own ideas, and building a small network of human ingenuity that quietly impressed some of the alien instructors. The tension between Eli and Lyra became a kind of unspoken game. She would tease, challenge, and provoke, while he responded with calm observation, subtle strategy, and careful action. Every encounter pushed him further, sharpened his skills, and taught him more about the nature of his opponent. One late evening, Eli stood alone on a training platform high above the academy, looking out at the stars. He felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. He had trained harder than ever, studied his opponent in detail, and learned to anticipate her every move. But he also felt something else, a strange sense of anticipation. The duel was approaching, and he knew that when it came, everything he had done would be put to the ultimate test. Humans were underestimated, dismissed, and often ignored in this academy. But Eli had discovered a truth that few others understood. That careful thought, relentless preparation, and an unbreakable spirit could overcome even the greatest physical advantage. He had turned mockery into motivation, weakness into strategy, and doubt into determination. As he prepared to leave the platform that night, Eli thought about Lyra. She was still a formidable opponent, beautiful, brilliant, and confident. But he no longer saw her as someone invincible. He saw her as a challenge, a puzzle to solve, and perhaps in time someone whose respect he could earn. The stars above stretched endlessly, full of possibilities. Eli knew that the duel would not just test his skill, it would test his mind, his patience, and his humanity. And for the first time, he felt ready. He would face Lyra not with fear, but with confidence, intelligence, and a plan that would turn the mockery he had endured into a victory that no one would forget. The human who had been laughed at, dismissed, and underestimated was now preparing to make history. And when the duel came, Eli knew he would not just survive. He would rise. The day of the duel arrived faster than Eli had expected. The Academy's arena had been cleared for the event, and cadets of all species crowded the upper galleries, whispering with anticipation. Rumors had already spread about the human who had been training tirelessly in secret, and curiosity buzzed through the air. Even some instructors paused to watch. Humans were never expected to achieve much here, let alone challenge a cadet like Lyra. Eli stepped onto the arena floor, his heart pounding, but his expression calm. The floor shifted beneath him, the gravity altering in subtle increments, a test in itself. Floating platforms moved in unpredictable patterns, holographic obstacles sprang from the walls, and the air shimmered with energy fields designed to push every participant to their limits. This was no ordinary duel. It was a test of skill, intelligence, and adaptability. Lyra entered next, gliding effortlessly onto the arena. Her presence alone drew gasps from the audience. She wore a confident smile, her movements fluid, graceful, and precise. "Ready, human?" she asked, her tone sharp but tinged with amusement. Eli nodded once, keeping his eyes on her. "I'm ready," he said quietly. Inside, he felt a surge of determination. All the preparation, all the secret training, all the late nights had led to this moment. The instructor signaled the start. The gravity shifted and the duel began. Lyra moved first, faster than the eye could follow. She struck with precision, using her agility to dominate the arena. Eli ducked, dodged, and pivoted, keeping a careful distance. At first, it seemed hopeless. Every move she made was calculated and nearly flawless. The audience murmured in awe. How could a human keep up? But Eli did not panic. He relied on every observation he had made over the past weeks. He anticipated her feints, used the shifting platforms to his advantage, and moved unpredictably, creating small but critical openings. He did not need to match her strength. He only needed to exploit the moments she left exposed. Minutes passed, each more intense than the last. Lyra executed a spinning jump, attempting to land directly on Eli's path. He dodged at the last second, his feet landing lightly on a narrow platform. Using the momentum, he flipped backward, sending a floating obstacle spinning toward her trajectory. Lyra adjusted just in time, but a flicker of surprise crossed her face. The audience noticed the subtle change. For the first time, it seemed that Lyra was reacting, not dominating. Eli had forced her to consider him as more than a simple challenge. The whispers grew louder. "He's holding his own. Impossible. A human." He knew Lyra would try to anticipate his next moves. That was why he began to improvise, making small adjustments in his rhythm, testing her reactions. She responded, adapting with skill, but each response revealed new patterns, new tiny weaknesses that Eli could exploit. Sweat dripped down his forehead and his muscles screamed, but he focused. Every movement was calculated, yet flexible. He did not rush. He conserved energy, anticipating the perfect moment to act. This was a battle of intelligence and endurance as much as it was of skill. Lyra, for her part, was growing increasingly aware of him. She had underestimated humans for years, expecting them to falter when pressure increased. But Eli was not faltering. He moved with purpose, his eyes constantly observing, analyzing, predicting. She tilted her head, a flicker of admiration appearing beneath her competitive pride. Then came the critical moment. Lyra executed a complex spin, aiming to trap Eli between two floating platforms. The audience gasped, certain he would fail. But Eli anticipated the move. Instead of countering directly, he shifted his weight subtly, landing on a platform that allowed him to pivot behind her. He used the arena itself as a tool, channeling her momentum into a path he had prepared. Lyra realized too late what he had done. Her attack carried her past the optimal landing point, and Eli's timing was perfect. He landed lightly behind her, close enough to control the next exchange, but careful not to strike aggressively. This was still a duel, not a fight to injure. For a moment they froze, eyes locked. Lyra's usual smirk was gone. She studied him carefully, sensing his mastery of timing, prediction, and improvisation. "Impressive," she admitted, almost reluctantly. "I didn't think a human could do that." Eli responded with ingenuity, using platforms, obstacles, and his own agility to turn her attacks into opportunities. The audience was enthralled. The human was not just surviving, he was pushing Lyra to her limits. At one point, Lyra attempted a daring aerial flip to strike from above. Eli noticed her pattern and predicted the exact landing point. He moved there first, intercepting her path with a precise maneuver that forced her to adjust midair. The agility, timing, and intelligence required for such a move were beyond what anyone had expected from a human. The spectators were on the edge of their seats. Even some alien cadets whispered in disbelief. Eli's movements were not as fast or as strong as Lyra's, but they were smarter. Each dodge, pivot, and feint was perfectly calculated, exploiting tiny openings that no one else could see. As the duel approached its final moments, both opponents were breathing heavily. Sweat and energy fields shimmered around them, but neither showed signs of giving up. Lyra's confidence had shifted into concentration, and Eli's fear had turned into exhilaration. This was the moment they had both been preparing for, though in different ways. Eli saw the final opportunity. Lyra attempted her signature move, a high-speed spin aimed to overwhelm any opponent. He anticipated every detail, the speed, the angle, the timing. Instead of trying to match her force, he used his momentum to move in a counterintuitive direction, causing her spin to carry her past him. In that brief opening, he executed a controlled maneuver that placed him in an advantageous position, demonstrating precision and mastery without direct confrontation. Lyra froze, impressed despite herself. She realized she had underestimated him completely. Her previous mocking had vanished, replaced by genuine respect. You planned that," she said, her voice soft but edged with awe. Eli smiled faintly. "I studied you," he admitted. "I learned your strengths and your weaknesses. Humans are not strong, but we think, we adapt. That is our advantage." The audience erupted into applause, not just for the spectacle, but for the human who had achieved the impossible. Even instructors nodded, acknowledging his ingenuity. Lyra stepped forward, extending a hand. "You've proven yourself," she said, a rare smile curving her lips. "More than I expected. Humans are more capable than I thought." He felt a mixture of triumph and relief. This was not victory in the traditional sense. He had not overpowered her, but it was a triumph of intelligence, preparation, and human ingenuity. He had turned mockery into opportunity and doubt into respect. In the days that followed, the academy buzzed with talk of the duel. Eli was no longer just the struggling human. He was a cadet who had challenged the best and forced her to acknowledge his skill. Lyra, for her part, continued to test him in smaller ways, but the tone had shifted. The teasing was now mixed with curiosity, and there were moments when she observed him with genuine interest rather than amusement. Eli continued to train, not to compete again immediately, but to refine his abilities further. He had learned that survival and success in this environment depended not on raw strength, but on thinking, planning, and adapting. The duel had shown him the truth. Humans could hold their own, even against beings far stronger and faster. Lyra approached him one evening as he practiced alone. "You surprised me," she said softly. "I thought I could easily outmaneuver you, but you think differently. It's impressive." "Perhaps I judged humans too quickly," she admitted. "I will watch you more closely now. You may yet prove yourself beyond my expectations." He had turned ridicule into respect, proving that humans could match even the most gifted aliens through intelligence and determination. As the stars outside the academy glimmered in the night sky, Eli realized that this duel was only the beginning. Lyra's challenge had awakened something inside him, a drive to prove, not just to her, but to the galaxy, that humans could achieve greatness even when underestimated. And the next steps, he knew, would test him in ways he had yet to imagine. After the duel, the academy felt different to Eli. It was as if the walls themselves whispered about the human who had survived, adapted, and challenged a cadet of unparalleled skill. For the first time, he noticed subtle changes in the way aliens looked at him. Some regarded him with curiosity, others with grudging respect, and a few even approached him for advice or cooperation. Lyra, of course, was the most intriguing change. She no longer mocked him outright. Instead, she tested him in quieter, more personal ways. Small challenges appeared in her eyes, in her tone, in the subtle traps she left in daily exercises. It was no longer just a duel. It had become a game of intellect, perception, and mutual understanding. One morning, Eli was called to a training simulation unlike any before. The arena was vast, a combination of floating platforms, shifting gravity, and holographic adversaries that mimicked the most unpredictable enemy tactics. Lyra was already there, waiting. She approached with her usual grace, but there was a spark of curiosity in her eyes. "Today," she said, her voice calm, "we are not just testing combat. We are testing your decision-making, your judgment, and your ability to lead. I want to see how far you've grown." Eli's team of humans and a few aliens he had quietly mentored moved through the shifting arena. Obstacles appeared with no warning, holographic threats shifted unpredictably, and alliances had to be managed carefully. Lyra observed from above, occasionally adjusting variables to test his reactions. Eli's mind raced as he coordinated movements, anticipated attacks, and adapted strategies on the fly. Every decision mattered. One wrong move could cost him points or even end the simulation. But he remained calm, using the same patience and intelligence that had guided him through the duel. Lyra was visibly impressed. Her eyes followed his every action, noting how he delegated tasks, predicted enemy movements, and used unconventional solutions. He had learned not only from observing her, but also from understanding human strengths in ways she had never considered. After the simulation, Lyra approached him. "You've done well," she said, her tone more serious than usual. "Your strategy is solid, and your ability to anticipate is remarkable. You're not just adapting, you're innovating. They will test your character, your understanding of others, and your ability to navigate complexities you have yet to encounter." Each test was designed to push him beyond raw skill, forcing him to rely on insight, empathy, and judgment. Eli excelled in these challenges as well. He listened carefully to others, weighed their perspectives, and made decisions that balanced efficiency with fairness. The alien instructors noticed, whispering among themselves. Humans were capable, indeed, if underestimated. As their interactions deepened, a strange tension began to form between Eli and Lyra. It was no longer simple rivalry. There were moments when her teasing tone softened, moments when she seemed genuinely curious about his thoughts, his plans, even his humor. She began to ask questions that had nothing to do with training, questions about his background, his motivations, and the world he came from. Eli responded with honesty, cautious but open. He shared stories of his home planet, of its challenges, of the ways humans adapted to survive in harsh environments. Lyra listened, intrigued. She had never considered that humans, though physically weaker, had resilience, creativity, and a determination that rivaled any alien species. One afternoon, as they walked together through a simulation chamber filled with shifting terrain, Lyra posed a direct question. "Eli, why do you push yourself so hard? Most humans would have accepted defeat long ago." "We may not be the strongest, but we can adapt, learn, and find ways to overcome. I want to prove that we are more capable than most expect. Perhaps I misjudged you, and perhaps I misjudged your kind." As weeks passed, the Academy began to notice the change. Eli's abilities, both in combat and strategy, had improved dramatically. He was no longer the struggling human cadet. He was a leader, a thinker, and a problem solver. Lyra's challenges had become opportunities for growth, and he had seized every one of them. One evening, Lyra invited Eli to a quiet area overlooking the stars. The city below glimmered with alien lights, casting reflections on the metallic platforms around them. "You have proven yourself in combat and strategy," she said softly. "But the true test is yet to come. Can you navigate alliances, trust, and emotions? Can you rise above simple rivalry and understand those around you? Every challenge teaches something new. I want to learn everything I can. Lyra's challenges became more personal, and Eli rose to meet each one with intelligence, empathy, and courage. They debated strategy, discussed philosophy, and occasionally teased each other lightly, their conversations filled with subtle competition and growing respect. It was during one of these late-night discussions that Lyra finally posed a question that would change everything. "Eli," she said, her tone unusually serious, "if you continue to prove yourself, if you continue to rise above expectations, would you be willing to take on a challenge of a different kind? A challenge that requires more than skill, more than strategy, more than courage." Lyra's eyes gleamed faintly, the starlight reflecting off her skin. "A challenge that tests your character, your understanding, and perhaps even your heart. One that could lead to something neither of us has considered before." This was personal, emotional, and potentially far more important. He realized that Lyra's challenge was no longer just about proving skill. It was about proving worth, trust, and compatibility. Over the next days, they engaged in tasks that required cooperation rather than competition. They worked together on interstellar strategy exercises, diplomatic negotiations, and simulations where trust and understanding were crucial. Eli learned to anticipate not only her actions, but her thought process, and Lyra began to rely on his insights as much as he relied on hers. Their relationship continued to evolve subtly. Respect had grown into admiration, admiration into trust, and trust into something deeper, though neither would name it yet. Each challenge, each conversation, each shared moment reinforced the connection between them. It was no longer simply human versus alien. It was two minds meeting on equal footing, learning from and challenging each other. One evening, after a particularly demanding simulation, Lyra approached Eli privately. "You have exceeded every expectation I had," she said quietly. "Not just in skill, but in judgment, adaptability, and perseverance. You've proven that humans are capable of far more than most of my kind believe. I learned from watching, from observing, from understanding. And I also learned from you, Lyra. Every challenge you gave me made me stronger, sharper, and more aware. One that may define not only your future, but mine as well." As they walked side by side through the quiet corridors of the academy, Eli understood that the true challenges were only beginning. The next test would not only require skill, intelligence, and courage, but also insight, empathy, and understanding. And he felt ready. Lyra's challenge had evolved, and so had he. What had started as mockery had become a journey of growth, learning, and connection. And as the stars stretched endlessly above the academy, Eli realized that this journey was far from over. The next step would test both of them in ways they had yet to imagine, and it would bring them closer than either could have anticipated. For Eli, the lesson was clear. Humans were underestimated, yes, but through intelligence, perseverance, and understanding, they could rise above every expectation. And now, he was about to face the ultimate challenge, one that would not only define his place in the academy, but also shape the bond that had quietly grown between him and Lyra. The academy buzzed with an unusual energy. Word of Eli's progress had spread throughout the corridors and across the observation decks. Humans who were once quietly dismissed now watched him with admiration. Some even whispered hopes that he could achieve something no human had before. The aliens, too, looked on with respect, realizing that their long-held assumptions about humans were being challenged. And Lyra watched him with a keen intensity that Eli could no longer ignore. The final challenge was not to be a simple duel or a test of strategy. It was an interspecies summit exercise, a simulation designed to prepare cadets for real-world leadership and diplomacy among hundreds of species. Alliances would be tested, problems solved, and leadership judged. Success here meant recognition, respect, and prestige beyond the academy. Eli was nervous, but he carried with him weeks of preparation, observation, and experience that no one else could match. Lyra approached him that morning, walking beside him in the bright corridors. "This is the last step," she said softly. "If you succeed, you will have proven not only your skill, but your judgment and leadership. You will also have proven that humans are capable of more than we ever imagined." "I've learned a lot, and I'm ready." Eli moved quickly, coordinating his team of humans and a few aliens he had earned the trust of. They navigated crises calmly, resolving disputes with insight and fairness. Eli anticipated problems before they occurred, communicated clearly, and made decisions that balanced strategy with empathy. His unique perspective as a human, observant, resourceful, and creative, proved invaluable. Lyra observed closely, impressed by his ability to lead under pressure. She occasionally introduced new challenges, sudden emergencies, or complex ethical dilemmas to test his judgment. Each time, Eli adapted, thinking several steps ahead and finding solutions that impressed even the most skeptical alien observers. Hours passed in intense focus. By the end of the exercise, it became clear that Eli's team had not only completed the task successfully, but had done so with creativity and intelligence that surpassed expectations. Alien cadets and instructors alike began to acknowledge the human who had been laughed at, underestimated, and dismissed. Eli had proven that humans were capable of extraordinary accomplishments when they applied intelligence, determination, and ingenuity. After the exercise, the Academy gathered in the central hall. Instructors, cadets, and even dignitaries from other planets had come to observe. Lyra approached Eli with her usual grace, her eyes glowing with a mixture of pride and curiosity. "You have exceeded every expectation," she said softly. "You have shown skill, intelligence, empathy, and leadership. You have proven that humans are capable of greatness. Every challenge made me stronger, smarter, and more aware. One that tests understanding, trust, and heart. If you succeed, it will define not just your future here, but mine as well. Eli, if you continue to prove yourself worthy, would you accept a lifelong partnership with me? A challenge that turns rivalry into trust, and admiration into a shared path forward." Lyra was offering him a partnership, personal, meaningful, and symbolic. It was a test of character, integrity, and heart. He looked at her, seeing the sincerity behind her words. She had tested him, challenged him, and watched him grow. And now she was offering something that no one had anticipated, a bond built on mutual respect, shared experiences, and admiration. "I accept," Eli said firmly, his voice steady despite the rush of emotions inside him. "Not because it is easy, but because it is meaningful. Because I respect you, Lyra, and because I believe we can achieve more together than apart. Not just in challenge, not just in competition, but in whatever comes next." The human who had been mocked had turned every challenge into opportunity, every test into growth, and had earned not only respect but a partnership that symbolized unity, trust, and the strength of humanity. In the following weeks, preparations began for a formal ceremony, blending human traditions with Lyra's alien customs. The Academy celebrated the union as a symbol of cooperation, understanding, and the incredible potential of humans. Eli and Lyra worked together to honor both their worlds, planning a ceremony that represented mutual respect, shared growth, and the promise of the future. The day of the ceremony arrived. Cadets from all species gathered, along with instructors, dignitaries, and families. The arena had been transformed into a spectacular space, filled with lights, floating platforms, and holographic displays representing both Earth and Lyra's home world. The ceremony was both formal and deeply personal, honoring the journey that had begun with mockery and evolved into admiration, trust, and partnership. Lyra stood before Eli, radiant and poised, her expression calm but full of warmth. Eli took her hand, feeling the weight and significance of the moment. Their journey had been long, filled with challenges, growth, and learning, but it had led to this point. As the officiant spoke, highlighting their accomplishments, shared experiences, and mutual respect, Eli and Lyra exchanged vows. They promised to continue learning from each other, to face challenges together, and to respect and support one another in every endeavor. The words were simple, honest, and heartfelt, reflecting the bond they had built through trials, tests, and understanding. When the ceremony concluded, the Academy erupted in celebration. Aliens and humans alike cheered for the union, recognizing it as a triumph not just of skill and intellect, but of heart, understanding, and unity. Eli and Lyra stood together, partners in every sense, their journey from mockery and rivalry to trust and partnership complete. Later, as the crowds dispersed and the arena grew quiet, Eli and Lyra walked together along the observation platforms, looking out at the stars. "We've come a long way," Eli said softly, his hand holding hers tightly. Lyra smiled, her eyes reflecting the distant galaxies. "From mockery to partnership," she said, "and yet I feel this is only the beginning. There is still so much to learn, to discover, and to share. And perhaps, together, we can show the galaxy what humans and aliens can achieve when they work as one." And in Lyra, he had found not just a rival or a mentor, but a true partner, a companion who would challenge him, support him, and share in every victory and every lesson yet to come. The galaxy was vast, full of challenges, opportunities, and unknown paths. But Eli and Lyra, once mocker and mocked, were now united, partners in every sense, ready to face whatever the universe had in store. And together, they would continue to prove that humans, underestimated and overlooked, could achieve greatness beyond imagination. The stars glimmered above, reflecting in their eyes, as the human who had once been mocked and the alien who had once mocked him walked forward into a future built on respect, partnership, and unbreakable determination.